The first time my marriage ended, I watched it happen and couldn't stop it. The second time someone tried to take my marriage from me, I showed up and made sure he understood the difference between a man who doesn't know and a man who does. That's the whole story in 2 sentences. But you didn't come here for 2 sentences. So let me take you back to the beginning, all the way back, because this story only makes sense if you understand who Nathaniel Cross is before everything that happened in September 2024. My name is Nathaniel Cross. I'm a civil engineer based in Chattanooga, Tennessee, 38 years old, and I have been through the kind of marital betrayal that restructures your psychology the way a bad storm restructures a coastline, permanently and not always in ways you can see from the surface. The first time I was married, I was 26. Her name was Melissa. We'd been together since junior year at East Tennessee State University, married the year after graduation, and I thought, with the complete and total confidence of a 26-year-old who doesn't know what he doesn't know, that we were solid. That we were the kind of couple people pointed to and said, "Those two figured it out early." We lasted 3 years. Melissa left me for a man named Dale Whitman. Dale was 41, owned 3 auto dealerships across southeast Tennessee, drove a different car every week, and had the kind of easy financial confidence that fills a room before the man walks into it. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't a villain in a film. He was simply richer than me, substantially, visibly, in ways that mattered to Melissa, in ways she hadn't fully told me they mattered. She didn't even apologize. That was the part that left a mark. She sat across from me at our kitchen table in our apartment on Cherry Street in Chattanooga, and she said, "Nathaniel, I love you. I just need more than this, more than this, more than me. More than a 29-year-old civil engineer with a good mind, a small apartment, and a future that hadn't happened yet." I signed the divorce papers in 2013. I was 29 years old, and I made a decision sitting in my truck outside Rita Sandoval's law office. Yes, same attorney. Chattanooga is not a large city. That I was going to be fine, that I was going to rebuild, and that I was never, for as long as I lived, going to be the man who couldn't hold his wife because someone with more money came along. What I didn't know then, what I wouldn't understand for years, is that what I'd actually decided was to carry the wound forward without ever properly closing it. I spent my early 30s building the career, the reputation, the financial stability that I apparently needed to feel like I was enough. I was promoted to senior engineer by 32. I bought my house on Signal Ridge Road at 33. I drove a truck I owned outright, kept a savings account that made me feel anchored, and I was, by any external measure, doing very well. And then I met Vanessa. We met at a fundraising dinner for the Safe Haven Alliance, a domestic violence shelter here in Chattanooga, in the spring of 2016. I was there because a colleague had an extra ticket and peer pressured me into attending. Vanessa was there because she'd been volunteering with the organization for 2 years, doing pro bono therapy sessions with residents, because that is the kind of woman Vanessa Whitfield was. She was standing near the bar, arguing politely but firmly with a city councilman about the shelter's funding allocation, and she was winning. And she didn't seem to notice or care that the councilman was 3 times her age and twice her rank. I stood nearby and watched her systematically dismantle his counterarguments with the pleasant demeanor of someone who knows they're right and has decided not to make it embarrassing for anyone. I thought, that woman is going to be a lot of work and absolutely worth it. I was right on both counts. We dated for 2 years, a deliberate pace, because I told Vanessa in the first month that I had been through a divorce and I needed to move at a speed I could trust. She didn't flinch. She said, "That's fine. I'm not in a hurry. I want to do this right." And she meant it. We married in June 2016. Small ceremony, outdoors in the Chattanooga hills, because Vanessa had no patience for anything that required a seating chart more complicated than necessary. Griffin was my best man. Vanessa's friend Denise Marsh was her maid of honor. 4 years of marriage, no children yet. That was a conversation we kept scheduling and then rescheduling. Not from avoidance exactly, more from the honest acknowledgement that we were both deeply committed to our work and neither of us wanted to rush a decision that couldn't be reversed. We had time. We were only 37 and 38. Vanessa is a licensed professional counselor and therapist, the kind who specializes in executive behavioral health. High-functioning adults dealing with addiction, narcissistic personality patterns, anxiety, and the specific kind of damage that extraordinary wealth and pressure can do to a person's psychology over time. She built her practice over 12 years, from a modest office suite on Fraser Avenue into something that ran entirely on word-of-mouth referrals from a very specific network. Corporate attorneys, financial advisors, CEOs, and the kind of people whose names you'd recognize from local business publications. She was excellent at her job, patient, precise, and possessed of a particular ability to hold boundaries with people who were not accustomed to being told no. That ability, as it turned out, would be tested more severely than either of us anticipated. In January 2024, through a referral from a private wealth attorney in Nashville, Vanessa took on a new client. His name was Preston Kessler. Preston was 53 years old, a developer and private equity investor based out of Nashville, but with significant holdings across Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama. His net worth, according to public reporting in the Nashville Business Journal, was somewhere between $30 and $400 million. He had been married twice, divorced twice, and had a reputation in Nashville financial circles as someone who was brilliant, relentless, and extraordinarily difficult to work with. He had been referred to Vanessa because he had an alcohol dependency he was trying to manage privately, without the exposure of a celebrity rehab program or anything that might surface in business press, and because he had been described by the referring attorney as having, quote, significant blind spots around how he affects the people around him. That was the attorney's polished way of saying Preston Kessler was a narcissist, a clinical one, functioning at a high level nonetheless. A man for whom other people existed primarily as instruments of his own needs, and who had spent 53 years being wealthy enough that no one had ever meaningfully pushed back. Vanessa had worked with this profile before. She knew the territory. She set up their sessions on a bi-weekly schedule, conducted via secure video call from her office on Fraser Avenue. I knew she had taken on a new client. She mentioned it in passing over dinner one evening in late January, the way she often did. No name, no details. Vanessa was meticulous about client confidentiality. She simply said she'd taken on someone new who was a handful but interesting work. I didn't think anything of it. I should tell you what our life looked like in early 2024 so you understand what was at stake, because it was a good life. A genuinely good one, in the specific, unflashy way that only becomes visible when you're about to lose it. We had our routines. Saturday morning coffee on the porch swing. Mine had 2 sugars, hers was black, and I had never once gotten that wrong. Sunday grocery runs to River Market. Dinner at the Ember House on Broad Street, maybe 5 times a year, always for something worth celebrating. Weeknight evenings where we sat in the living room and half-watched television and fully talked. The kind of conversation that doesn't have a point but holds a marriage together. We had Poppy, our beagle mix, who slept at the foot of the bed and took her role as household emotional barometer very seriously. And we had the quiet, established trust of 2 people who had chosen each other carefully and then kept choosing each other daily, which is the only way trust actually works. I didn't know yet that someone had decided to put that trust under a stress load it was never designed to bear. The first sign that something was off came in March 2024. Vanessa came home from her office one Thursday evening quieter than usual. Not upset. Vanessa didn't do upset outwardly. She processed internally. But something had shifted in the particular quality of her silence. I know her silence the way a musician knows the difference between a rest and a pause. This one had weight in it. Long day? I asked. Had a session that went sideways, she said. She set her bag down, poured herself a glass of water, and stood at the kitchen sink for a moment, looking out at the backyard. I didn't press. With Vanessa's work, pressing was rarely the right move. But later that evening, when she thought I was asleep, I was still awake on my side of the bed, and I heard her exhale. Long, slow, controlled. The exhale of a woman managing something. I didn't know it then, but the thing she was managing had a name, and it was going to put everything we'd built in the crosshairs. By April 2024, Vanessa had been treating Preston Kessler for 3 months, and somewhere in the architecture of those sessions, something had begun to shift. Preston had started with what Vanessa later described to me as calibrated flattery, the kind that sounds like therapy-appropriate self-reflection, but lands just slightly wrong. Comments about how he'd never had a therapist who really understood him. References to her intelligence that lingered a beat longer than professional appreciation warranted. Observations about her voice, her manner, her presence that had nothing to do with the work they were supposed to be doing. Individually, each comment could be dismissed. A therapist who worked with narcissists understood the difference between a client seeking genuine connection and a client testing the perimeter. Preston was testing the perimeter. Then he pushed past it. In mid-April, during what was supposed to be a session focused on his alcohol dependency triggers, Preston made a comment that was, without any ambiguity, sexual, direct, deliberate. Vanessa shut it down immediately in the precise, clinical way she was trained to, redirected the session, documented the incident in her notes, and sat with a decision she wasn't yet ready to verbalize. She didn't tell me that night, and I understand why. I do now. Then, I didn't have the information to understand anything. By May, it had happened twice more. Each time, Vanessa responded with professional boundary setting. Each time Preston apologized with the smooth, practiced sincerity of a man who has learned that apology is a tactic rather than a reckoning. And each time, the comment that followed the apology was slightly more forward than the last. He was escalating slowly, incrementally, the way a structural load increases. Not enough to trigger alarm at any single moment, but accumulating toward a point of failure. Vanessa knew this. She had mapped this pattern in other clients. She could see exactly where it was going, and she made her decision. In late May 2024, Vanessa formally terminated her therapeutic relationship with Preston Kessler. She did it by the book. A written notice of termination, a referral to 2 other practitioners in the Nashville area who specialized in his profile, and a final session to close the clinical relationship appropriately. Professional, clean, final. She believed that would be the end of it. She was wrong, and the way she found out she was wrong would change everything that came after. The first delivery came on a Thursday morning in June 2024. I remember because I worked from home on Thursdays, and I was at my desk when the delivery truck pulled up. It was a flower arrangement, not a modest one. A large, formal arrangement. White orchids and dark red roses in a glass vase, I could tell, was expensive from 10 feet away. The delivery person handed it to me at the front door with the mild professionalism of someone who hands over flowers for a living and has no particular interest in their meaning. There was a card. Vanessa. Thinking of you. P. I stood at the front door holding this arrangement, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Something cold and specific, sitting in the back of my chest, just behind the sternum. Not jealousy. Not yet. Something more like the professional instinct, the civil engineer's reflex, the feeling of running your hand along a surface and finding a crack where there shouldn't be one. I set the flowers on the kitchen counter. I didn't throw them. I didn't make any assumptions. I am, by nature, a man who collects information before drawing conclusions. This is a useful quality in engineering. In marriage, it means sometimes you hold things quietly when you should be asking out loud. When Vanessa came home that evening, I was in the kitchen starting dinner. I nodded toward the arrangement on the counter. "Someone named P thinks of you," I said. Neutral, fact-based. Vanessa went very still for a fraction of a second, so brief that if I hadn't known her for 6 years, I might have missed it. Then she said, "A former client. I terminated his sessions last month. He's apparently not taking it well." "Former client," I said. "I'll handle it," she said. And I believed her, because Vanessa Cross handles things. That's who she is. But something in the back of my mind filed that fraction of a second of stillness the way you file a hairline crack in a beam. Not alarm. Awareness. I didn't know it yet, but Preston Kessler had done a very specific kind of homework on Nathaniel Cross, and the gifts were only the opening move. The second delivery came 2 weeks later. A gift basket, high-end, the kind assembled by a professional service. Gourmet items, a bottle of champagne, a small envelope that I did not open because it was addressed to Vanessa. She opened it privately. She didn't tell me what it said. I noticed. I filed it. I said nothing. The third delivery was the one that cracked something open in me. It arrived on a Saturday morning in early July, a Saturday when I was home, when Vanessa was home, when we were both visible in the life we shared on Signal Ridge Road. It was a jewelry box, small, wrapped in navy paper with a silk ribbon. The delivery note was handwritten, not typed. Handwritten in a script that was too deliberate to be casual. "For everything you deserve, Preston." I held that note for a moment. Then I set it on the counter next to the jewelry box, and I walked to the back porch, and I stood there in the July heat, and I breathed, because there is a difference between a former client who sends flowers once and is confused, and a man who learns your home address and sends a handwritten jewelry delivery on a Saturday morning. And somewhere in the space between those two things, the ghost of Melissa and Dale Whitman had begun to stir. That old wound, the one I thought I'd closed, the one that whispered, "You weren't enough before. What makes you think you're enough now?" Vanessa found me on the back porch. "Nathaniel," she started. "Tell me what's happening," I said, still calm. Deliberately calm, because the alternative was to let 12 years of unprocessed fear do the talking. and I was smart enough to know that would not serve either of us. She sat down on the porch steps and told me most of it. The inappropriate comments in the sessions, the termination, the fact that she had thought it was over. She did not tell me everything. I would find out later that she'd held back several details. Not to deceive me, but because she was genuinely afraid of what the full picture might do to me, given my history, given Melissa, given what I had told her early in our relationship about what it had cost me the first time. She was protecting me in a way that backfired, because half-truths, even generous ones, leave gaps that the imagination fills in with the worst possible material. "How wealthy is this man?" I asked. She looked at me steadily. "Very." And there it was. The thing I had been trying not to think. The thing that had lived in my chest since 2013 and never fully left. I stood up. I walked back inside. And I spent the next 48 hours doing something I am not proud of, but will be honest about. I retreated into myself. Not anger, not accusations. I didn't have enough information for accusations, and I wasn't the kind of man who made them without evidence. But I went quiet, in the specific way that Vanessa knew was not good. The way that meant I was carrying something I hadn't handed to anyone yet. She saw it. She didn't push it. And she made a decision of her own. Vanessa's closest friend was a woman named Denise Marsh. They'd been friends since college, the kind of friendship that has survived 15 years of life changes and maintains a specific, reliable chemistry. Denise ran her own small marketing firm and had the kind of practical intelligence that made her good in a crisis. Vanessa trusted her completely. In early July 2024, Vanessa confided in Denise. Not everything all at once, but over 2 or 3 conversations across that month, Denise got the full picture. Preston Kessler, the escalating comments during therapy, the termination, the gifts, the handwritten note, and the part that Vanessa said quietly on a phone call with Denise one evening when I was still at the office. Her fear about what this was doing to me. "He's gone quiet," Vanessa told her. "You know what that means?" Denise knew. What Vanessa didn't know, what she would not find out until much later, at a lakeside restaurant in the hills with a recording device in her bag and a billionaire sitting across the table, was that Denise had decided to do something about it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. In August 2024, Preston Kessler escalated beyond gifts. What we later pieced together, through Preston's own admissions and through what Denise helped uncover, was that Preston had, at some point after the termination, conducted what amounted to a background investigation on Nathaniel Cross. He knew about Melissa. He knew about Dale Whitman. He knew about the divorce in 2013 and the specific nature of it, that my ex-wife had left me for a wealthier man. He had found the crack in the foundation, and he was applying pressure directly to it. The campaign was subtle and calculated. A second set of flowers arrived, this time with a note that Vanessa intercepted before I could see it. Denise saw a photo of it. The note implied intimacy that did not exist, framed as a private joke, a shared memory, the kind of language designed to look, to an outside observer, like something it wasn't. Preston knew that if I saw it cold, without context, my history would do the rest of the work for him. He was trying to make me doubt my wife. He was trying to make me see Melissa when I looked at Vanessa. And in August, in the silence of our house, in the quiet retreat I had constructed around myself like a structural shell, he was slowly succeeding. I didn't accuse Vanessa of anything. I want to be absolutely clear about that. I made no accusations, but I withdrew. I was shorter in conversation. I slept with the distance of a man who is holding a question he is afraid to ask out loud. And Vanessa, who knew exactly where that withdrawal came from and exactly who had engineered it, was watching her marriage cool from the outside and feeling the specific helplessness of a woman who has all the evidence but none of the format to present it without causing the very damage she was trying to prevent. She needed Preston on record, not as his therapist. That relationship was over, and the ethical protections of that role no longer applied. As a private individual confronting a man who was harassing her. Under Tennessee law, an individual may record a conversation to which they are a party without the consent of the other party. Vanessa knew this. She is not a woman who makes moves without knowing the legal ground she's standing on. Her plan was clean. She would contact Preston, agree to meet him in person, framing it as a conversation about his behavior, knowing full well that Preston's ego would interpret this as an opening. She would lead him through the conversation, get him talking, get him admitting. His narcissism would do the heavy lifting. Preston Kessler was not a man accustomed to being told he had done something wrong, and Vanessa knew, from 3 months of sessions, exactly how he would respond when he felt he was in control. She would get the confession on tape. She would bring it home. She would show it to me. and she would show me that nothing happened, that the man trying to ruin our marriage was not a rival, but a predator, and that the only thing standing between his plan and its failure was Vanessa herself. The location she chose for the meeting was a lakeside restaurant and bar at Nickajack Lake outside Chattanooga, a place Preston had mentioned during sessions as somewhere he liked to conduct informal business. She told him she wanted to meet somewhere neutral and private. Preston, whose ego translated "meet me privately" into confirmation of his own narrative, agreed immediately. She told Denise the full plan. She told me she was going on a quick overnight trip with Denise. A break, some air, nothing elaborate. She did not tell me the real plan because she did not want me anywhere near Preston Kessler until she had what she needed. She was trying to protect me again. And again, it didn't go quite the way she planned. What Vanessa didn't know was that Denise, sometime between hearing the plan and the morning of the trip, had made a phone call to me. I didn't know it yet, but the conversation Denise was about to have with me was going to change what happened at that lake entirely. Denise called me on a Tuesday morning in mid-September 2024. I was at my office reviewing drawings for a commercial project on the south side of Chattanooga. Priya Shah, my assistant, had put the usual coffee on my desk. Everything was ordinary. "Nathaniel," Denise said when I picked up, "I need you to listen to me carefully and not make a single decision until I've finished." I leaned back in my chair. "That's a very specific opening, Denise." "Yes," she said. "It is, because what I'm about to tell you requires a man who can hear the whole thing before he reacts. Can you do that?" "Tell me," I said. She told me everything Vanessa had told her, not just the parts Vanessa had shared with me. All of it. The full escalation, the specific content of the inappropriate comments Preston had made in session, the background investigation he'd conducted on me, the deliberate framing of those gift notes to exploit what he knew about Melissa, the fact that Vanessa had been shielding me from the scope of it because she knew what even the shadow of this situation could do to me, given my history. I sat at my desk and I listened, and the listening was the hardest thing I had done in years, because every sentence was simultaneously a revelation and a reckoning. A revelation about how far Preston had gone, and a reckoning with the fact that I had let myself go quiet instead of asking out loud, and in doing so had merely handed this man exactly the damage he was aiming for. "She's going to that lake tomorrow to get him on record," Denise said. "She doesn't want you there because she doesn't want you anywhere near him until she has the recording." "But Nathaniel, I've been thinking about this all week, and I think she's wrong about that part." "Why?" I said. My voice was steady. I was focusing very hard on keeping it that way. "Because Vanessa is going to get him talking, and she might get what she needs." But Preston Kessler is a man who has been doing whatever he wants to, people his whole life, because nobody has ever looked him in the eye and told him there are consequences. A recording is evidence. You showing up with someone recording on your terms is a message. It's a different thing entirely. She let that sit. You showing up as her husband, standing there, and saying what needs to be said. That closes this. A recording she brings home and shows you privately that starts a legal process. And legal processes with men like Preston take years and drain everything. But a man who shows up and makes it clear he knows everything, and that the next move destroys Preston's very public career, that ends it the same day. I sat with that for a long moment. She wasn't wrong. I asked Denise one thing. "Does Vanessa know you're calling me?" "No," Denise said. "And then. But she will, and I believe she'll understand why." I made a decision sitting in my office on a Tuesday in September 2024. The same kind of decision I'd made 11 years earlier in the parking lot of a law office on Market Street. Except this one was different. This one was not about surviving something. This one was about refusing to let someone take what was mine. Not because of pride. Not because of the ghost of Melissa and Dale Whitman. Because Vanessa Cross was my wife, and someone had decided to use my history, my wound, my specific vulnerability as a weapon, and I was done letting that wound sit unhealed in the dark where people could find it and exploit it. I called an old friend. His name was Marcus Webb, former college roommate, now a private security consultant in Chattanooga. I told him what I needed. He said he'd be there. Wednesday, September 18th, 2024. I drove to Nickajack Lake. Some things you can't engineer in advance. You can plan the structure, calculate the load, account for the variables, but the moment the work begins, the moment you're actually standing in the space, you have to trust what you know and move. I arrived at the lake at 11:40 a.m. Marcus Webb was already parked near the restaurant entrance in a charcoal Jeep Grand Cherokee, wearing a plain navy jacket and the expression of a man who has been in many rooms where things were about to happen. He had a small body camera on his lapel. Discreet, professional. The place Vanessa had chosen was a lakeside restaurant and bar called the Heron, a well-regarded spot on the waterfront with a wide outdoor deck built over the water. Excellent sightlines and enough ambient noise that a conversation could feel private without actually being private. I'd looked it up the night before. Preston apparently had good taste. I grant him that. I sat in my truck for a few minutes. The lake was doing what it does in September, glittering with the particular blue-green clarity of early fall, the surrounding ridgelines just beginning to turn at the tips. It was a beautiful place to do an ugly thing, which seemed about right for Preston Kessler. Marcus walked over to my window. "She's inside," he said. "They're at a table on the outdoor deck. She's got her bag on the table, recording device inside. Active. She doesn't know we're here yet." "Good," I said. "You want to walk through the approach?" "No," I said. "I know what I want to say." Marcus nodded once, the nod of a man who respects a clean plan. I got out of the truck. "I want to tell you what I felt walking across that parking lot, because I think it matters. I did not feel rage. Rage is for men who have run out of other options. I had not run out of options. I felt something closer to clarity. The specific clarity that comes when every variable has been accounted for, when the design is correct, when all that remains is execution. I felt like a civil engineer walking a site he had already reviewed on paper. I walked through the restaurant, nodded at the hostess. She started to speak, and I smiled and said, "I'm joining someone on the deck." I walked through the interior and out through the sliding glass doors to the outdoor terrace, and I saw them. Vanessa was seated across from Preston Kessler at a table near the railing, with the lake behind her and the September sky overhead. She was leaning slightly forward in the way she does when she's focused, elbows on the table, hands folded, her recorder running silently in her open bag. She was professionally composed, but I could see, in the set of her shoulders, the specific tension of a woman who is doing something that costs her. Preston was across from her. I'd looked him up before I drove out here. I'm a thorough man, but seeing him in person was a different thing. He was large, well-dressed, expensive in the specific way that men are when they've worn expensive things so long it stops looking deliberate. Silver hair, broad through the chest, a watch that probably cost more than my truck. He was talking, and he was leaning in, and the quality of his posture, the way he occupied the space, the practiced ease of a man accustomed to having his full attention received as a gift, told me everything I needed to know about what Vanessa had been navigating since January. He was a man who had never been told no by anything that money couldn't eventually persuade. Vanessa saw me first. Her eyes found me across the deck, and she went still in a way that was so fast and so complete that Preston, mid-sentence, noticed. He turned, and I walked toward the table. I pulled out the chair beside Vanessa, not across from Preston, beside my wife, and I sat down, unhurried. I folded my hands on the table. Marcus had come onto the deck behind me and taken a position near the railing, 8 feet away. Not threatening. Present. Preston looked at me, then at Vanessa, then back at me. "You must be the husband," he said. His voice was smooth, controlled. A man recalibrating in real time. "Nathaniel Cross," I said. "And you're Preston Kessler. This is a private meeting." "It was," I said. "Now it's a different kind of meeting." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lean forward or perform any of the body language of dominance that insecure men deploy when they want to look powerful. I sat still, because stillness, when it belongs to a man who isn't afraid, is the most effective thing in any room. Preston looked at Vanessa. "You told him." "She didn't have to," I said. "You want to understand how I know what I know, Preston? I'll tell you, because I think it's important that you understand this next conversation with full information." He closed his mouth. "You've been sending gifts to my home. You've been writing notes designed to look like something they're not, because you know my history and you thought you could use it to make me doubt my wife. You did a background check on me. You found out about my first marriage, and you made a calculation. If you applied enough pressure to the right place, the foundation would crack and my marriage would fall apart." "That was your plan?" Preston said nothing. His jaw had gone tight, but his eyes were still calculating, still looking for the angle. "The flaw in your plan," I continued, "is that you misread the load-bearing capacity. You thought you were dealing with a man who broke once and never properly healed. What you were actually dealing with was a man who broke once, rebuilt, and has spent every day since then making absolutely certain nothing breaks the same way twice." I paused. "Let that breathe. Now, I'm going to say some things, and I need you to hear all of them before you decide what you're going to do next." Preston leaned back in his chair, very slightly. An involuntary retreat. He probably didn't know he'd done it. I noticed what you did with my wife in those sessions. The comments, the escalation. That's documented. She kept clinical notes. Those notes can become evidence in a civil claim for professional harassment. She is no longer your therapist and has been formally terminated, which means there is no therapeutic privilege protecting you. Everything that happened in those sessions is legally accessible in a civil proceeding. I let him absorb that. The gifts you sent to my home, with notes framed deliberately to imply intimacy that doesn't exist, those are documented. Photographs, delivery records. They establish a pattern of harassment following termination of a professional relationship. That pattern, combined with the evidence from the sessions, is the foundation of a lawsuit that I will file in Hamilton County, Tennessee, and I will make sure it is covered by every business publication in this state before the first hearing date. Preston's expression had shifted. The easy confidence was still there. Men like Preston don't lose it entirely. It's been too long a habit. But underneath it, something had recalculated. And the background investigation you conducted on me personally, I added, specifically to identify and exploit psychological vulnerabilities for the purpose of destabilizing my marriage. That's something I've already discussed with an attorney. We'll let her tell you what that creates. Vanessa had not said a single word. She was sitting beside me, and I could feel the quality of her stillness. Not the stillness of a woman who was frozen, but the stillness of a woman who was watching something unfold that she had not expected and did not know yet how to hold. I would understand that later, all of it. But right now, I had one more thing to say. Preston, I said. I used his first name deliberately, evenly, the way you use someone's name when you want them to understand, you see them clearly. I know what you are. I've been briefed thoroughly on how you present and what you do when you don't get what you want. I'm not angry at you. I don't have the energy for anger at men like you. But I need you to hear this as clearly as I can possibly say it. I leaned forward, just slightly, enough to close the distance. My wife is not available to you. My marriage is not a structure you can dismantle. And if you send one more item to my home, make one more attempted contact with Vanessa, or use anyone as a proxy to reach either of us, I will spend whatever it takes, for as long as it takes, to make sure every person in your professional and personal life knows exactly what you are. Not because I'm vindictive, because you will have made it necessary. The deck was quiet. The lake moved behind Vanessa's shoulder. A boat passed in the middle distance, slow and far away. Preston looked at me for a long moment. The calculation was still happening behind his eyes. Men like Preston always have one more angle they're running. But I watched something change. Not remorse. Preston Kessler did not do remorse, but recognition. The specific recognition of a man who has identified an obstacle he cannot move and has decided, for purely practical reasons, to redirect. He straightened in his chair. He picked up the glass of water on the table and took a slow sip. And then he said, I think we've all said what we came here to say. He stood. He buttoned his jacket. That single, composed gesture of a man who will not let you see him leave in disarray. He looked at Vanessa briefly, then at me. He walked off the deck without another word. Marcus watched him go, then looked at me and gave a small nod. Everything had been captured. Clean, clear, full. And then it was just me and Vanessa at a table on a deck above Nickajack Lake on a Wednesday morning in September, with the hills around us and the sound of the water below and the September sky doing the beautiful thing it does in early fall. Vanessa was looking at me. How? She said. Just that one word. The way people speak when they have 100 questions and only the energy for one. Denise, I said. She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were full. Not of tears exactly, but of something close to tears, the kind that live right at the edge of composure in people who work very hard to maintain it. I told her not to. I know, I said. She made the call she thought was right. Honestly, she was right. Vanessa exhaled, long and slow. The particular exhale I recognized as the release of something that has been held too long. Nathaniel, she said, I was so scared. Not of him. I could handle him. I was scared of what this was doing to you. After Melissa, after everything, I didn't know how to bring this to you without watching it reopen something that took you years to heal. I know, I said. I thought if I handled it. I know, Vanessa. I wasn't trying to shut you out. I reached across the table and covered her hands with mine. I know all of it, Denise told me. And here's what I need you to hear. Are you listening? She nodded. I am not the man I was in 2013. I was then, and he's not in this story anymore. I know who you are, and what you were doing here today, before I walked in, was protecting our marriage. That's what you were doing. You were fighting for us." She held my hands tightly. "I should have come to you sooner," she said quietly. "I should have trusted you with the full picture. I was so focused on protecting you from the fear that I didn't realize I was feeding it by going silent, and I went quiet when I should have asked." "We both did some version of the wrong thing with the right intention," I said. "That's just marriage. That's two people who love each other making imperfect decisions under pressure." She laughed a little. One of those laughs that lives right next to crying, and sometimes is both at once. "An apple pie would fix this," she said. "I didn't bring one this time. We'll stop somewhere on the drive home," I said. We sat on that deck for another hour before we drove back to Chattanooga. We ordered coffee. We talked, really talked, the way we hadn't fully talked in weeks. She told me everything. The sessions, Preston's specific comments, the deliberate cruelty of the background investigation, the notes. I listened to all of it, and every time I felt the old fear try to stand up in my chest, the Melissa ghost, the Dale Whitman ghost, I named it. That's the old wound. This is not that situation. This is my wife who fought for our marriage at a lake in the hills while I was still in the dark. That's a different thing, and it mattered. As for Preston Kessler, he went quiet completely. The gifts stopped the same day. No phone calls, no proxy contacts, no further communication of any kind. Whether it was Marcus's recording, the credible threat of civil litigation, or simply the recalculation of a man who had found something that wouldn't yield, I don't know. I don't particularly care. He chose to redirect. Good. Denise told Vanessa about the phone call the same evening we got back. Vanessa's first response, apparently, was a long silence. Her second was, "I should be irritated with you." Her third was, "I'm so glad you did it." Denise, who is constitutionally incapable of false humility, said, "I know. I called Griffin that night. Second ring, as always." "How'd it go?" he asked. "Good," I said. "It went good. You sound different. I feel different," I said. And I did. Not because I'd confronted a wealthy man and made him back down. That was just a problem solved. I felt different because of what had happened on the drive home. The full conversation, the honest inventory of what we'd both done under pressure and why, and the decision. Mutual, deliberate, together. Not to let a man who had never earned a single thing in our marriage have any real estate in it. Here's the thing about Preston Kessler that I keep returning to. He was a man who had spent his entire life using money and information and calculated pressure to get what he wanted from people. He had identified what he believed was the weakest joint in the structure of my marriage, my history, my wound, my particular vulnerability. And he had applied force to it with precision. What he hadn't accounted for was the difference between a wound that hasn't healed and a wound that has. They look similar from the outside. The scar tissue is there either way. But one of them yields under pressure, and one of them is actually stronger than the original material. That's basic civil engineering. Preston should have done more homework. By October 2024, life on Signal Ridge Road had returned to its rhythms. Saturday morning coffee, Vanessa's black and mine with 2 sugars. Sunday runs to River Market. Poppy at the foot of the bed. Date nights at the Ember House, where the ribeye remained excellent and they still knew us by name. There were new things, too. We started seeing a marriage counselor. Not because we were in crisis, but because 2 people who almost let silence and assumption cost them everything owed themselves the work. Dr. Renee Ashford on Lookout Mountain Road. Practical, direct, good at calling things out without drama. We went twice a month. It was some of the most useful 2 hours in my week. We had the kids' conversation again, properly this time, without the shelving. And we made a decision about it that I'll keep between us, because not every part of a marriage needs to be told to an audience, even a good one. Vanessa updated her client intake screening process, not because of fear, because of professionalism. She added clearer language around behavioral expectations in the therapeutic relationship, a second session review point for boundary compliance, and a faster escalation protocol for inappropriate conduct. She talked to her professional liability insurer. She talked to the state licensing board about options for reporting behavioral incidents. She built a better system. That's Vanessa. She doesn't survive things. She systematizes them. As for Nathaniel Cross, I repainted the guest room. I run 3 mornings a week on the Riverwalk Trail. I make ribs on Saturday afternoons because I'm good at it, and the house smells like something worth coming home to. and I keep the porch swing in good condition. I refinished it last spring. Dark walnut stain, 2 coats. Vanessa says it looks better than it ever has. I think she's right. Some structures, when you maintain them properly, don't just hold, they improve.